In the autumn of 1896, a repair crew pulled up the first floorboard in the east hallway of Grayfield Manor in Culpeper County, Virginia. They found a name. They assumed it was a carpenter mark. Something scratched into the wood during construction. They set the board aside and pulled up the next one. Same name. Third board. Same name. Fourth. Same name. By the time they had pulled up 12 consecutive floorboards and found the same name on every single one, the lead carpenter, Owen Bassett, had stopped working entirely. He stood in the middle of the hallway staring at the pile of boards beside him with the expression of a man who has just understood that he is standing inside something much larger than a repair job. The name was Nora, not carved deeply, scratched with something small and sharp, a nail perhaps, or the tip of a blade, in letters that were uneven and unpracticed but unmistakably deliberate. On some boards the letters were large, spread across the full width of the plank. On others they were tiny, compressed into a corner, as though the person writing had been working quickly, afraid of being heard. On a few boards a name appeared multiple times on the same plank, written over and over as though repetition itself was a point. Bassett contacted the property owner, a member of the Hale family estate, who sent a historian named Dr. Caroline Webb to the site within the week. When Webb finished her initial survey 3 days later, she had a number that stopped every conversation she tried to have about it. 407 floorboards in Grayfield Manor. 403 of them had the name Nora written on the underside. The 4 that did not were later replacements, never part of the original house. Every original floorboard, every single one, the same name. The question Dr. Webb could not stop turning over in her mind was not who Nora was. She already had a strong suspicion. The question was how. How does a name get written on 403 floorboards in a house, where the floors are nailed down, and the people who might have written it are being watched every hour of every day? How does something that enormous stay hidden for nearly 50 years? And what did it cost the person who did it? Grayfield Manor was built in 1847 by a tobacco planter named Edmund Hale, who had inherited the Culpeper County property and spent years expanding it into one of the most substantial estates in the Virginia Piedmont. The main house was a 2-story federal-style structure, all finished in heart pine flooring sourced from a mill in North Carolina at considerable expense. The floors were the feature Edmund Hale was proudest of. Visitors to Grayfield in the 1850s frequently remarked on them in letters and diaries. Clear and even grain, not and not visible. Edmund Hale was 43 when the house was completed, a man of precise habits and considerable social ambition, known in Culpeper County as a capable manager of both hired workers and the 31 enslaved people who lived on his property. He served on the vestry of the local Episcopal Church. He was appointed to the county court in 1851. He corresponded with his counterparts on other Virginia states about agricultural methods and the management of enslaved labor with the clinical detachment of a man who had fully absorbed the ideology of his world and never once questioned it. The enslaved people at Grayfield in 1847 included, according to Edmund Hale records, a woman in her mid-20s listed only as Nora. Occupation, house servant. Assessed value, $280. No last name. No birth date. No information about her origins or her family. Just a name, a function, and a price. Dr. Webb found Nora in the records within 2 days of returning to Richmond. Finding her was not the difficult part. The difficult part was everything that came after. Drop a comment and tell us where you are watching from. Subscribe and hit the bell if you are new here, because what Dr. Webb uncovered about Nora and what she did and what it cost her is one of the most extraordinary things in the history of this country. And we are only at the beginning. The first thing Dr. Webb needed to establish was when the name had been written. 403 floorboards installed in 1847, each one bearing the same name. The writing could have been done all at once, during installation, before the boards were nailed down, or it could have been done over time, board by board, in stolen moments over years. The answer would determine almost everything else. Webb brought in a wood specialist from the College of William, and Mary named Dr. James Hopper, who spent a week at Grayfield examining the inscriptions closely. His findings were clear. The tool used was consistent across all 403 boards, likely a single nail or iron stylus. The pressure applied was consistent, suggesting the same hand throughout, and the wood beneath the inscription showed aging patterns consistent with the writing having been done before boards were installed, when they were still unfinished lumber. Someone had written the name on every board before they went down. This changed everything. It meant Nora had access to the boards during the weeks in 1847, when the heart pine flooring was being installed. The name had been placed deliberately and systematically on every board before it became a floor. Someone had wanted to make certain that the name would be everywhere, that no matter where you stood in Grayfield Manor, no matter which room, you were standing on top of her name. The question of how Nora had access to the boards led Webb to a man named Caleb. Caleb does not appear in Edmund Hale records by last name, only as Caleb Carpenter, listed among the enslaved workforce at Grayfield from 1843 onward. In 1847, during the construction of the main house, a single notation suggests Caleb was involved in the flooring installation specifically. The notation reads only, Caleb assisting floor crew week of March 14th. 1 week. Caleb had 1 week of access to those boards before they went down. Dr. Webb found a connection between Caleb and Nora in the Culpeper County Register of Slaves. In an entry from 1843, Caleb is listed with notation that reads, paired with Nora, house servant Grayfield, 1 child, infant male, born 1842, died same year. They had lost a child. And the following year, in 1843, Nora had been moved from the field quarters to the main house as a house servant. Webb suspected this was not a promotion. It was a separation, deliberate and punitive, a management decision by Edmund Hale that physically removed Nora from proximity to Caleb under the guise of a reassignment. By 1847, when the floors went down, Nora and Caleb had been kept apart for 4 years. They shared a plantation. They could see each other at a distance. They could not be together in any meaningful way. And then Caleb spent 1 week installing floors. What passed between them during that week is not recorded anywhere. Webb found one telling detail in Martha Hale account books. For days in the week of March 14th, 1847, where Nora's name does not appear in Martha's meticulous daily recording of servant duties. For days where she is simply absent from the record. For days. 403 boards. Roughly 100 boards per day, each one requiring only seconds to scratch a name into unfinished wood. It was possible. Barely, but it was possible. Webb kept returning to the same image. A woman in her late 20s, moving through a construction site during 4 days when her absence had gone unrecorded, working through a stack of heart pine boards with a nail, writing the same name over and over on every board before it went down. Not a message to anyone. Not a protest visible to the people who oppressed her. Something else entirely. Nora was making herself permanent in a world that treated her as temporary, as transferable, as a line item in a ledger that could be moved or sold or erased at any moment. She was writing herself into the structure of the house itself, putting her name under every floor, so that no matter what happened to her, no matter where she was taken or what became of her, her name would be there, beneath the feet of the people who owned her. Beneath the floors of the house, she cleaned and maintained and was never permitted to leave. It would be there after she was gone. She was right. What happened to Nora after 1847 is where the historical record becomes both clearer and harder to read. Edmund Hale Plantation records from 1848 through 1855 contain regular references to Nora in connection with household duties. She is listed consistently as a house servant. She does not appear in connection with any disciplinary action, which in the context of Hale meticulous documentation almost certainly means there was none. She was, by the available evidence, a quiet and cooperative presence in the household. Dr. Webb spent considerable time trying to understand what quiet and cooperative looked like for a woman who had written her name 400 times on the floors of a house she was not permitted to leave, what it cost to perform that compliance every day. What she was thinking when she walked across those floors, knowing what was under them. The historical record cannot answer that question, but it provided something Webb had not expected to find. In the spring of 1897, a woman named Patricia Holt contacted Webb after reading an article about the Grayfield discovery in the Virginia Historical Society Quarterly. Holt was a retired schoolteacher from Richmond who had spent years tracing her family history. She believed, based on documents carefully assembled over 2 decades, that she was descended from an enslaved woman named Nora held at a Virginia plantation in the mid-19th century. She had not been able to identify the plantation. The Grayfield discovery gave her what she needed. She was right. Church records, estate documents, and Culpeper County registers confirmed beyond reasonable doubt that Patricia Holt was the great-great-granddaughter of Nora of Grayfield Manor. Webb and Holt met for the first time in the summer of 1897 in the east hallway of Grayfield Manor, standing on the restored floors above the boards that still bore the name. They spent 4 hours together in that house. Both women described it afterward as unlike any conversation they had experienced before or since. Holt told Webb things the historical record had not preserved. Family stories passed down through 4 generations in fragments. She knew an ancestor had been enslaved in Virginia. She knew the ancestor name was Nora. She knew, from a story her grandmother had told her once and only once, that this ancestor had done something no one in the family fully understood, but that everyone remembered as important. She had hidden herself somewhere that they could not take away. That was the phrase. She hid herself somewhere they could not take away. The family had never known what it meant. They had assumed it referred to a physical hiding place, a room where Nora had found refuge. When Holt stood in the east hallway of Grayfield, and Webb explained what was on the floors, Holt was quiet for a very long time. Then she said quietly, she hid herself in the house. That was it exactly. The further historical record of Nora life at Grayfield is incomplete in ways that may never be resolved. She appears in Edmund Hale records through 1858, then disappears without explanation. There is no record of a sale. There is no death record in the county records for an enslaved woman of her description. There's a notation in Martha Hale account books from October 1858 that reads only, Nora gone. No further explanation. No indication of what gone meant or where she had gone. Webb believes Nora ran. She cannot prove it. But the woman who spent 4 days writing her name under 400 floors is not a woman who waited passively for whatever came next. Caleb's fate is documented, and it is the hardest part of this story to set down. In 1852, Edmund Hale Plantation records show the sale of an enslaved carpenter named Caleb to a buyer in Richmond. The sale price was $340. The record contains no other information. Where Caleb went after Richmond, whether he was resold again, whether he survived the decade, whether he ever knew about the floors, is not known and may never be known. His name does not appear in any document after 1852. He was sold 5 years after floors went down. Whether he knew what Nora had done, whether she had told him, whether the week of installation had been his idea or hers, or something that emerged between 2 people who loved each other and had almost nothing left, is one of the questions the archive cannot answer. The floors of Grayfield Manor were carefully documented and preserved after the 1896 discovery. The boards bearing Nora's name were photographed and cataloged. When the house was opened for historical tours in 1898, the first thing every guide explained in the east hallway was what lay under the floor. Visitors were invited to stand quietly for a moment after they heard it. Most of them did. Most of them looked down. Patricia Holt visited the house twice. On her second visit, she brought her daughter and her grandchildren. She stood with them in the east hallway and told them the story. Then she said something her daughter wrote down because she felt it needed to be preserved. She said, "Your great-great-grandmother stood in this exact spot and decided that she was going to be remembered. She did not have a pen and paper that anyone would keep. She did not have a book or a monument or a grave marker. She had a nail and a stack of wood and 4 days when no one was watching. And she used every one of those 4 days to make sure that one day her family would stand in this house and know her name. Culpeper County, Virginia, 1847. A woman with nail in 4 days and 400 boards. She hid herself somewhere they could not take away. She was right. They could not.